All right, welcome to week 3. This is the common lit for this week. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read it, and then I'll show you the questions you need to answer. What does the flu do to your body and why it makes you feel so awful? Every year, from 5 to 20% of the people in the United States will become infected with influenza virus. On average of 200,000 of these people will require hospitalization and up to 50,000 will die. Older folks over the age of 65 are especially susceptible to influenza infection, since the immune system becomes weaker with age. In addition, older folks are also more susceptible to long-term disability following influenza infection, especially if they are hospitalized. We all know the symptoms of influenza infection include fever, cough, sore throat, muscle aches, headaches, and fatigue. But just what causes all the havoc? What is going on in your body as you fight the flu? I am a researcher who specializes in immunology at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine, and my laboratory focuses on how influenza infection affects the body and how our bodies combat the virus. It's interesting to note that many of the body's defenses that attack the virus also cause many of the symptoms associated with the flu. How the flu works its way into your body. Influenza virus causes an infection in the respiratory tract or nose, throat, and lungs. The virus is inhaled or transmitted, usually via your fingers, to the mucous membranes of the mouth, nose, or eyes. It then travels down the respiratory tract and binds to the epithelial cells, lining the lung airwaves via specific molecules on the cell surface. Once inside the cells, the virus hijacks the protein manufacturing machinery of the cell to generate its own viral proteins and create more viral particles. Once mature, viral particles are produced. They are released from the cell and can then go on to invade adjacent cells. Let's take a look at some of the words they use. Susceptible, it's an adjective, likely to be influenced or harmed by something. If you go up, you'll see the second superscript on immunology is a branch of medicine and biology that deals with the immune system. And epithelial cells are cells on the surface of your body, serving as a barrier between the inside and outside of your body. All right, moving on to page 2. While this process causes some lung injury, most of the symptoms of the flu are actually caused by the immune response to the virus. The initial immune response involves cells of the body's innate immune system, such as macrophages and neutrophils. These cells express receptors that are able to sense the presence of the virus. Then they sound the alarm by producing small hormone-like molecules called cytokines and chemokines. These alert the body that an infection has been established. Cytokines orchestrate other components of the immune system to appropriately fight the invading virus, while chemokines direct these components to the location of the infection. One of these types of cells is called into action are T lymphocytes, a type of white blood cell that fights infection. Sometimes they are even called soldier cells. When T cells specifically recognize influenza virus proteins, then they begin to proliferate. And we'll go down to see that proliferate means to increase rapidly in numbers in the lymph nodes around the lungs and throats. This causes swelling and pain in these lymph nodes. After a few days, these T cells move to the lungs and begin to kill the virus-infected cells. This process creates a great deal of lung damage, similar to bronchitis, which can worsen existing lung disease and make breathing difficult. In addition, the buildup of mucus in the lungs as a result of this immune response to infection induces coughing as a reflex to try to clear the airwaves. Normally, this damage triggered by the arrival of T cells in the lungs is reversible in a healthy person, but when it advances, it is bad news and can lead to death. The proper function of influenza-specific T cells is critical for efficient clearance of the virus from the lungs. When T cell function declines, such as with increasing age or during use of immunosuppressive drugs, go down to 5. Those are drugs that suppress an individual's immune response. Viral clearance is delayed. This results in a prolonged infection and greater lung damage. This can also set the stage for complications, including secondary bacterial pneumonia, which can also be deadly. Why your head hurts so much. While the influenza virus is wholly contained in the lungs under normal circumstances, several symptoms of influenza are systemic. Systemic is an adjective relating to a system, especially as opposed to a particular part of that system. These systemic include fever, headache, fatigue, and muscle aches. In order to properly combat influenza infection, the cytokines and the chemokines produced by the innate immune cells in the lungs become systemic. That is, they enter the bloodstream and contribute to these systemic symptoms. When this happens, a cascade of complicating biological events occur. One of the things that happens is the interleukin-1, an inflammatory type of cytokine, is activated. Interleukin-1 is important for developing the killer T cell response against the virus, but it also affects the part of the brain in the hypothalamus that regulates body temperature, resulting in fever and headaches. Another important cytokine that fights influenza infection is something called tumor necrosis factor alpha. This cytokine can have direct antiviral effects in the lungs, and that's good. But it can also cause fever and appetite loss, fatigue, and weakness during influenza and other types of infection. Why your muscles ache. Our research has also uncovered another aspect of how influenza infection affects our body. It is well known that muscle aches and weaknesses are prominent symptoms of influenza infection. Our study in an animal model found that influenza infection leads to an increase in the expression of muscle degrading genes and a decrease in expression of muscle building genes in skeletal muscles in the leg. Functionally, influenza infection also hinders walking and leg strength. Importantly, in young individuals, these effects are transient, which means it lasts only for a short time, and return to normal once the infection has cleared. In contrast, these effects can linger significantly longer in older individuals. This is important since a decrease in leg stability and strength could result in older folks being more prone to falls during recovery from influenza infection. It could also result in long-term disability and lead to a need for a cane or walker, limiting mobility and independence. Researchers in my lab think that this impact of influenza infection on muscles is another unintended consequence of the immune response to the virus. We are currently working to determine what specific factors produced during the immune response are responsible for this, and if we can find a way to prevent it. Thus, while you feel miserable when you have an influenza infection, you can rest assured that it is because your body is fighting hard. It's combating the spread of the virus in your lungs and killing infected cells. Now that we're done reading, you will go to the text-dependent questions, answer questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as 5, which is a paragraph. You will send those via Remind, or you can send them to the email, which is Lefebvre, CAD, LEFEBVRECAD @gmail.com. Thank you.